city of Bordeaux is the heartbeat of a world-famous wine district of the same name. The Comité Interprofessionnel du Vin de Bordeaux has its registered office here. More than half the bottles produced in Bordeaux carry the name Appellation Bordeaux or Bordeaux Supérieur. The area is not much bigger than the City of London, and it's a good example of the fact that wine has a history and culture, and at the same time is a way of living for many people. The first vineyards are on the outskirts of the town. This is the famous Chateau Haut-Brion, which produces the finest and most expensive red wines in the world. Its history goes back for 5 centuries, and since then it's had many owners. Nowadays it belongs to foreigners, the family of the American former Minister of Finance, Douglas Dillon. At the mouth of the River Gironde, you'll find the Médoc and the Haut-Médoc. They're amongst the top 10 within the Bordeaux wine district, with beautiful historical chateaux like Béchevel, and famous wine villages having their own appellation contrôlée, such as Listrac, Mouly, Margaux, Pauillac and Saint-Julien, which proudly displays an enormous wine bottle alongside the road. In the well-kept vineyards of Médoc, you'll find rose bushes everywhere, an indication of the quality of soil, consisting mainly of river gravel. These vineyards have been owned by the well-known bankers family de Rothschild for over 4 generations. Their Chateau Mouton Rothschild is visited by 60,000 tourists every year. Baron Philippe de Rothschild made a major contribution to the success of the wines from this area. He died in 1988 and was buried in the grounds of the chateau. On the estate, now led by daughter Philippine, only oaken casks are used. The barrique, casks of 225 litres, in which the wine undergoes its first ripening, are replaced by new ones every year. This is one of the ways this expensive wine derives its specific character. In the dark cellars, over 100,000 bottles are ripening at a constant temperature of 11 degrees Celsius. Here is also where the unique and priceless private family collection is preserved. Some bottles even date back from the last century. "50 kilometers west of the city Bordeaux, on the coast, lies Arcachon. It's the most important area of the Côte d'Argent, the Silver Coast. The basin of Arcachon is an inner lake which is connected to the ocean. It offers much in the way of water sports, and it's also renowned for its oyster farms. For For a long time, fishing and oyster farming were the main sources of income for the villages around the basin of Arcachon. But nowadays, tourism has become the most important economic factor here. In the old fishing villages, the fishermen still bring in their oysters to plant them in big trays to grow until they're big enough to sell. And then, for the oyster fans, the feast begins. Here at Pila lies the highest sand dune of Europe. It's 105 meters high, and it's often called the walking dune because it's slowly moving inland. In Blanquefort, there's an important agricultural school for the Bordeaux region. For the last 2 years of education, it's possible to specialize in wine. The study demands a great deal of chemical knowledge and trains people to become wine experts. After qualifying, one can become cellar master on a chateau, manager of a cave cooperative, carry on the family's company, or start one's own wine estate. The profession of wine expert has traditionally been a man's job, but lately this training draws more and more female students.
What are you doing?
I suck a little red pine with a pipette, withdrawing the CO2 from it in order to measure the right acid grade.
What are you going to do with your diploma after finishing your study?
I would like to work in fine culture with my parents, but not all the students want that, so you can choose several aspects. Wine farmers are expected to have professional knowledge, to be able to work in the best possible way, to be able to compete internationally.
Le mieux possible et pour être compétitif sur les marchés internationaux.
Do you like wine yourself?
Yes, I was brought up with wine and in school. I also learned a lot about it.
The agricultural school of Blanquefort also has its own chateau. It's run as a commercial concern, and the intention is for the students to learn the whole process of winemaking. This includes keeping the vines in shape.
What are you doing?
I tie and trim the leaf so that the tractors can drive through the vineyard easily, and also grapes get more sun. Too much trimming is no good either, because the leaf feeds the grape.
Photosynthétise et donc alimente les raisins par la suite.
Machines are becoming more important in wine growing. Here, the students are practicing on the mobile pruning machines. In the Chateau's agricultural school, the students learn everything to do with wine: pressing, fermentation, storage, bottling, labelling, packing and selling. It's all part of the education of a wine expert. Back in the city of Bordeaux, here in a tonnellerie, the famous oaken wine barrels are made. This special oak comes from the Bordeaux region, situated in the centre of France. With modern woodworking machines, planks are made to measure. Making wine barrels is still an old craft. Planks are first selected. With a type of ruler, exactly how many planks are needed for one barrel is calculated. One by one, the strips of wood are put in a circle and clenched together with metal strips. The most difficult part is to give the barrel the right shape. The best way to bend the wood is to put it over a fire and to keep it wet. With a large tightening screw, the barrel is pulled into its final shape. Several strips keep the barrel in shape. About 20,000 wine barrels are made in this way each year. Graves, south of the city of Bordeaux, is not such a well-known wine region. Nevertheless, the wines from this part of Bordeaux are of excellent quality. Here you'll find historical chateaux like Chateau Bousquet, Chateau Pape Clément, the Domaine de Chevalier and the world-famous Haute-Brion, next to simpler and smaller wine houses like Chateau Bardin. For generations long, this chateau has been owned by the family Ségoyer. Today it's run by Yves, and every day his old father, who lives downstairs, still enjoys a glass of good wine. Grave is the French word for gravel. This gravel soil is excellent for wine growing. Different sorts of grapes are grown in this district. For red wine, mainly Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Blanc, Merlot and Malbec. For white wine, Sauvignon, Semillon and Muscadel. Yves Ségoyer grows grapes for red and white wines in his vineyards.
For the wines of the Graves area, the quality of the soil is most important. This is the typical gravel soil of the Graves. This soil gives a dry, fruity wine, especially the white wines. Not all Graves wines are sweet. They are dry wines. All the sugar has become alcohol.
But this will be red wine. The grapes are still unripe and white.
They will give a red Graves wine.
Mais ici, nous sommes dans une pièce de vin rouge et vous pouvez voir que le raisin est blanc parce qu'il n'est pas encore mûr. Il donnera un vin rouge de Graves.
Like all the Bordeaux wines, wines from the Graves district are made from several grapes. After the harvest, the wine ripens in oaken barrels for 12 to 18 months and is constantly checked for quality and taste. The composition of different kinds of wines provide its special character. But this happens only just before bottling. Each appellation contrôlée is made according to a fixed scheme of proportions. This, and the experience of the cellar master, determines the final composition of the wine. Bordeaux wines are classified, and there are over 50 classifications in total. On these wine labels are the names of many wine districts. All wines with their own appellation d'origine contrôlée. An AOC guarantees that wines are grown in a particular district and meet the requirements of that district. The requirements vary by district. All these different wine districts have one thing in common. They're all situated in the famous Bordeaux area with no less than 100,000 hectares of vineyards. In Fronsac, we find more wine farms than chateaux. It's a small district where mainly good quality red wine is produced. The wines are still made in the old-fashioned way by small families. Until the last century, Fronsac wines were considered superior to those from neighbouring Saint-Emilion, which are very famous nowadays. Wine and tourism are in perfect harmony in this medieval city, Saint-Emilion. It's one of the oldest wine towns of Europe, and it might be the world's most beautiful. This baker doesn't just make breads and croissants, he uses the ruby red Saint-Emilion wine for the filling of his famous wine truffles. The medieval monolith church and ruins of the Cordelier monastery are a unique curiosity. Underneath these ruins are cellars where sparkling wine is stored. Saint-Emilion is surrounded by beautiful vineyards, and the chateaux are not so large. This chateau, Tour Saint-Christophe, has been owned by the Guittier family for almost 50 years. The family ran a big travel agency in Paris, as well as their vineyard in Saint-Emilion. The couple are in their 90s, but have only recently retired.
Voilà.
This is our wine, a wine from 1983, which is an excellent wine year. 1992 and 1993 are the best years here, and now they are ready to be drunk. For this wine must lie and rest at least 4 and 5 years. What did wine bring you in your life? Perhaps it brought us living to a great age. We bought this chateau as an investment for our retirement when we were 40. That was during World War II. We bought this wine house and we stayed here. It serves us well, for my husband is 92 and I am 90 years old. Do you drink wine every day? Oh yes, every day. Not a whole bottle, but a glass with every meal. You drink it at the end of the meal with the cheese. Red wine fits meat and cheese, and red wine doesn't fit fish. Do you like wine? Certainly. Champagne fits everything. What will happen with wine in the future? Oh, people will keep on drinking wine. Bad wines will disappear. And will young people also keep on drinking wine? Sure, why not? As you can see, we are 92 and 90, still drinking wine. So there's a future for wine? Oh, certainly, especially for wines of good quality.
The vineyards of Saint-Emilion are centuries old and they're planted on limestone. But how did they grow wine on stone? Wine grower Dominique Bécaud discovered a piece of history on his land.
Ce que je suis en train de faire, les Romains l'ont fait. À l'époque gallo-romaine, avant
What I do was already done by the Romans before Christ. The first vines of Saint-Emilion were planted in these channels. Earth was put around it, as is done with flower pots. The vines here are planted in Gallic Roman channels, covered with a thin layer of earth.
Que vous voyez ici est planté sur des sillons gallo-romains, ce qui limite l'épaisseur de terre, et tout le vignoble est planté là-dessus.
These hewed-out channels are typical of the vineyards on the hills around Saint-Emilion. The limestone soil facilitated the digging of caves, and over the centuries, a labyrinth of 200 kilometers of passages have been dug underneath the city of Saint-Emilion and the surrounding hills. The wine growers are delighted, and it's a perfect place to store wine bottles.